Good evening. We're going to call to order the Thursday, January 24th, 2013 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Jens, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The second item on our agenda tonight is the election of the chairman and the vice chairman of this committee. So, Mr. Attorney, will you handle that for us, please?
Thank you. Every year at the first meeting of the Planning and Zoning, we have to elect a chairman and vice chairman as prescribed in code. I'd open the floor for nominations for the position of chairman.
I move we keep our current chairman, Sam Zimmerman, and Jens Tripson as vice chairman.
Second.
Are there any other nominations for chairman or vice chairman, whether they be combined or separate?
So, by the way, I didn't lip sync that motion. That was straight out of the heart.
Thank you for the clarification, sir. Seeing there are no other nominations.
Who seconded the motion, please?
It was made by Mr. Hamner and seconded
By everybody.
by, we'll give it to
Todd seconded it.
Todd Brignano then.
I stuttered, so I made it twice.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye? No, just kidding.
Ignored there, but carry on, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations.
Thank you. Item number 3 on our agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from the December 13th, 2012 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Item number 4 on our agenda this evening is an item that's not on consent. It's the River Preserve, which is a request for a major site plan approval. And the first thing I should ask, is there anybody on this committee who has any conflicts of interest or has had any ex parte communications regarding this or anything else on our agenda this evening? If so, speak up. Nobody? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to y'all.
Hello, John McCoy with the plan.
Actually, let me swear. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, so if anyone wishes to speak this evening in front of the committee, you need to be sworn in now. Okay.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you.
Good evening, John McCoy with the Indian River County Planning Staff for the record. This is a site plan application by for the River Preserve Apartments. For this particular site, there have been 2 previous approvals granted, one in 2001, one in 2003, and construction is started, but is not complete. This is the location map of the site, and we're primarily dealing with Phase 2, the western portion tonight. As you can see, the subject site is zoned RM6 in its majority, as are the parcels north and south of the subject parcel. Across US 1 to the west, the property is zoned general commercial. This is an aerial overlay of the overall property. Shows the existing improvements as well as the proposed improvements in a large scale. This is a detail of the western. You can see the existing improvements, which include the roadway and the retention areas, and superimposed over that is the proposed plan. I'd like to take a moment, show you the previous design. This was the previously approved plan for the 23 single-family lots. So you can see that the infrastructure remains the same. The lakes are in the same place, the roadways in the same place, emergency access is in the same place. What they've done is they've just tried to as best they can, and they did need to make some adjustments with drainage pipes and things like that and utility services, but by and large the infrastructure remains the same as it was for the proposed 23 lot single family subdivision. This is an overall site plan. Again, this puts things in context, gives you an idea about the separation between the east and the west development, and just gives you a feel for the spatial relationship and the overall context of the development. This is the site plan, shows the building layout. It is all surface parking. It is 96 units on 16 acres. It comes out right to 6 units per acre. The overall density is just under 6 units per acre of RM6 zoning. This is the phasing plan. The applicant is telling us that the eastern portion is still the phase 1. There are structures there. Their plan would be to complete those structures and obtain certificates of occupancy for those structures in the eastern portion prior to actually commencing structures in the western portion. One thing to note is the eastern portion is dependent upon the infrastructure in the western portion, so that's all going to need to be inspected and certified as far as the roadways, the utilities and things like that before a CO is granted in the eastern portion. Traffic circulation, and again, I just covered the area that's really subject to the change, and the infrastructure is in, so there's no change from a traffic circulation standpoint as far as new improvements. It's a two-way loop that loops around the interior of the apartment complex with a road that leads to the condominiums, and that's a two-way road. There's a small rotary, and then at the intersection, this is an actual median opening with the lines with Vickers Road, 99th Street across the way. There's a north or a southbound left turn and a northbound right turn lane at the project entrance, as well as turn lanes for Vickers Road. So it's a full intersection with a median opening. That will remain. Those improvements will be inspected by our traffic engineering division prior to getting a CO on any portion of the project. As far as the stormwater goes, the stormwater plan is very similar to the one for the subdivision. There are 3 existing lakes. The water will be conveyed to those stormwater via pipes and catch basins, be treated, and then discharged to the west, eventually to the wetlands and the Indian River eventually after it's been treated. As far as landscaping, the only real buffer is the arterial road buffer. There's an existing 6-foot wall. If you've been to the site, it's right adjacent to US 1. There is a wide landscape strip. The remainder of the landscape is perimeter landscaping, foundation plantings, and open space plantings. But since both the properties are to the north and south are zoned multifamily, there's no buffer for those adjacent properties. One of the last things I'd like to talk about are environmental issues. And I'd like to expand. I gave you a handout changing the recommendation to afford mosquito control access and have the applicant grant mosquito control access to this site. Historically, mosquito control has accessed this site for the purposes of mosquito control. They've accessed it prior to construction. They've accessed it during construction activities. And they've essentially had an agreement with the existing property owner that access is allowed and continue that. Through the development process, we want to formalize that access and establish that access, and that would need to be done prior to site plan release. The applicants agreed to that, and I just want to get that on the record as far as being formalized and a condition in the staff report. As far as other environmental areas, you can see that there is really a large undeveloped area in the center, and that's sort of a combination of wetlands and transitional wetlands and some uplands at the very western side, along with some other managed or created wetlands and stormwater area on the eastern side, and then some wetlands that are immediately adjacent to the Indian River. All of the blue area is subject to a conservation easement that's going to the St. Johns River Water Management District. That'll need to be slightly modified prior to site plan release. There's an upland easement that needs to go to the county. That also needs to be done prior to site plan release. With that, I'd get to staff's recommendation. Staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant site plan approval for the River Preserve Phase 2 with the conditions listed in the staff report and the added condition regarding mosquito control. Thank you.
Any questions of staff? I have a couple. On the apartment phase, part of it, there's 96 apartment units here. I'm curious, I don't see any clubhouse or any kind of office, any kind of anything like that, and I don't see any any places where, dumpsters would go or trash, or and would that only show up? I mean, obviously if there was a building for an office, that would have to show up here, but on the site plan, would the dumpsters have to show up? This is phase 2 I'm talking about.
Correct, and the dumpsters would need to show up because we want them to be screened.
But that would only be on site plan, that we wouldn't see that here?
You should see it here, and what's happened, as I understand it, and the applicant can explain probably a little bit better than I can, they have internal trash chutes, and the refuse storage will be internal to the building, as I understand it, the way the buildings are presently designed.
Is that the way and the county's going to pick up at each individual building?
Again, it's a private contractor. The county doesn't do waste management, but it would be between them and the franchise hauler to arrange for the way it would be picked up. The other item you talked about is a clubhouse. There's a clubhouse in the east, and we've talked to them about whether residents from the west will have access to that clubhouse, and they're looking at that. There is a recreation tract on the north, and presently that's shown as a tennis court.
On the south side.
The other question I had is that there's a sentence in number 14 about conservation easement. It says the applicant has opted not to plat the project, and the upland conservation easement and wetland conservation will need to be granted prior to the site plan release, right? So 2 questions. One, why prior to the site plan release? Because, I mean, theoretically, this could change again. It's changed twice.
Correct.
That would be difficult to undo. And secondly, why aren't they platting this?
They're not platting because they don't have the need to create lots.
Okay.
They don't have the need to do the fee simple transfer sale, so there's
understand.
not a need to plat it. Typically, when there is a plat, we get the easement with the final plat because it's easier to put it in. The risk we run in that case is we've allowed the land development work to occur. The reason with a site plan project is we typically get the easements prior to site plan release is it's also at the same time the land clearing and tree removal permits are issued, so we have a better ability to get the easement and make sure that there isn't damage occurring where that easement's going to be and everybody's aware of that easement.
Do conservation easements reduce the taxable value of a property?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either, but I'll offer my opinion. My understanding from the property appraiser's office is common areas, which this would be similar to their treatment of common areas and whether they're green areas or conservation areas, and they typically have zero or very nominal taxable values really based on the unit itself in projects like this. That's been our experience.
I have a question about the open space calculation, number 6. You give it in percentages. Do you have the numerator and denominator values that we use to calculate that 65.3%?
I do not. I would have to go back and look at the plan.
Well, 1.32 acres of that was credited for the lakes. Is that pretty standard to credit open space to the lakes?
Yes, the definition of open space allows a credit of up to 30% of the required open space can be water. So, say if you're required to have 10 acres of open space, up to 3 acres could be water.
So is that credited 1.32 acres a lot of this open space calculation, or?
It would be a fairly small area of the overall open space.
Okay.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak tonight about this? Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I move to approve staff's recommendation with the mosquito control amendment.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 5 on our agenda tonight is Indian River Square Shopping Center Kite Realty Group Indian River LLC's request to approve a non-concurrent parking study to accommodate a Chase Bank at the Indian River Square Shopping Center. Again, if there's anybody in the audience this evening that is planning on speaking on this matter, we need to swear you in now.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Any ex parte communications, any conflicts of interest from anybody on this committee? All right, we're ready to hear the story.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me just 1 second. Let me pull up this PowerPoint, and we will commence.
Not be wasting.
This is Indian River Square's request for parking study approval to facilitate the construction of a Chase Bank. And essentially what the applicant's doing is asking for a non-concurrent parking approval to demonstrate that parking is shared over time and that the different uses within the center have different peak parking demands at different times. This is the location of the subject site, and let me walk you through it. The yellow is the proposed location of the building and parking field for the proposed Chase Bank. There is an outbuilding that fronts State Road 60, which is a retail building, and then the majority of the shopping center building is set back, and it's between the Target and the Lowe's buildings on the east and west of the subject site. When you take into account the building area for the shopping center and the outbuilding, they are maxed out on their parking based on the code, which is 1 space per 200 square feet of gross building area. So if you were to take the number of parking spaces and divide it by the gross building area, you'd come right out to that 1 to 200 figure. In this particular instance, and that's why they've opted for the parking study to add the Chase Bank. And as part of the parking study, the methodology that they've agreed to through traffic engineering is to collect data over 3 days. That's based on 15-minute increments at 3 locations in the county. One is the subject site, the Indian River Square, the other's Century Town Center, and the other is Miracle Mile. What they've done is they've observed the peak demand and time of that demand. That then gets adjusted for the peak season parking demand, and then there's a safety factor of 15%. The highest demand was observed at Miracle Mile, and that was the use, or the location, the rate that was used to prepare this study was the Miracle Mile. Next, I'd just like to show you the 2 sites that were not the subject site. That's the Miracle Mile, which is this one. It did, or does, have a bank as part of the area that was studied, and then a retail area and a retail building, separate retail building over here. The Century Town Center site is a large retail area and 2 out parcels, and while the out parcels are not part of the development, they do share and spill over some parking based on some easements. So those are the 2 other sites that were studied. The results of the parking study indicated that a rate of 1 space per 240 square feet is adequate to meet the peak parking demand for this area. The project site plan proposes 69 spaces more than that rate of 1 space per 241 square feet. And this is just a comparison of the county code at the 1 space per 200 square feet, the rate that the parking study demonstrated at 1 space per 241 square feet, and then when you take what they actually provide physically in the field, you come up with a rate of 1 space per 216 square feet is what's actually proposed. The county's done a number of these for shopping centers, and staff is looking at essentially modifying, we may be back to with an LDR change to actually modify the rate. Nationally, the rate varies anywhere from about 1 space per 175 square feet to 1 space per 250 square feet. So that's a pretty broad range. we're at the more conservative end of that range. So we are looking at potentially modifying that and coming back to you all with an LDR amendment potentially in the future to modify that. With that, I would like to get to staff's recommendation, and staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the parking study for the Indian River Square Chase Bank at the rate of 1 space per 241 square feet. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Would the applicant care to speak on this matter at all? Any questions up here?
Move approval of staff's position.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving right along. Planning matters?
Just to, Mr. Chairman, since your last meeting in December, the Board of County Commissioners adopted some comprehensive plan text amendments that you all recommended that they adopt, and that included an elimination of the density transition buffer that we discussed a while back. And comprehensive plan amendments can now be accepted 4 times a year instead of twice a year, so they're January, April, July, and October windows for that. There were a few other updates, but I just wanted to highlight those.
Is that a county-only thing, or is that did that come out of Tallahassee?
Well, what state legislation changed to eliminate a limitation on the number of submittals for amendments that are not small-scale amendments. So they gave flexibility to local governments to change, and we did so. The other, just an interim update, you all saw an LDR amendment for outdoor vehicle storage in CL and CG. Because it changes the list of uses in our zoning code, 2 hearings are required before the Board of County Commissioners, and we had one this last Tuesday. They're going to have another one in February. And at the meeting, there were some concerned residents from the Ursula Dune subdivision up in the North County, which is adjacent to a CL zone site. They've become aware of a development project, and one of the potential uses of that project, if the amendment passes, is outdoor vehicle storage. And they voiced some concerns before the board. And so the board is going to have their second hearing in February, but they indicated that they're going to take a look at alternatives with the ordinance as you all saw it, and might possibly not adopt it. So we'll know by the next time this commission meets. But I did want to give you an update on that. Their hearing is set for 5:01 p.m. On February 5th, and that's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Attorneys matters?
None, Your Honor.
We're adjourned.
Good night. Good night.